Welcome to Lead Wisco. I'm here with my friend Ryan Kibbe. How you doing, my friend?
I am well. Doing well.
Probably just to have everybody understand, we are a podcast, and from what I understand now, a cinemacast, which I didn't know.
That sounds highly technical.
It does. It sounds very like I want to watch that on a Friday evening, but I don't know if that's
makes us
true.
feel important. Yeah.
We are a cinemacast, but we're really dedicated to stories about leadership, people's work in their own personal life, and how faith and leadership intersect. And we know there's a lot of podcasts out there, but we intentionally are trying to find unique stories. We love Wisconsin stories. Obviously, our podcast is called Lead Wisco, which anybody else from any other state can listen to it. If you're from Minnesota or Chicago or Illinois, we still like you. But really, we want to find more Wisconsin stories. So any of those you have, please send to us. But tell us again, I know we talked a little bit about why, but just briefly.
Yeah, the why is, and we're on a journey too, because you have really uncovered the heart posture of people in this mind, body, spirit, all of that. We've uncovered that, we're not just intellectual beings on an emotional experience. We have this whole, you called it the four quadrants, the mind, the heart. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, but leaders have to engage on all these different levels.
Right.
And faith, obviously, for you and I, from our profession as pastors, it's important to us.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's important to this podcast.
Yeah.
How do we foster greenhouse environments in these leaders where healthy people grow?
Yeah.
That's really what we're looking for: healthy homes, mind, body, spirit, all of that, and then bringing that here in Wisconsin and sparking conversation to foster that.
Yeah, and we're not afraid to. Well, we would not afraid. We're inviting all types of people. So I would hope people even that don't have a faith. I like your greenhouse picture because aren't we saying anyone's invited into the dialogue?
Everyone's invited.
Yeah, that's so good. Mm-hmm. Well, Ryan, today you get another treat because you're going to meet another one of my friends for many years. Dr. Steve Gerndt is a friend, not just because he does a really cool thing and works on hearts, probably more importantly, because he's done his own heart work, and you're going to hear that in a minute. But he's the father of a daughter and two boys. His whole family seems like they're all doctors. He'll have to clarify that for a minute, but has been in the industry for quite a long time here in Green Bay. But let's welcome, I'm going to say Dr. Steve Gerndt, and then from now on it's Steve.
Please.
Okay.
And thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah. Hey, it's an honor to be here. Troy, I'd go anywhere with you because you're my brother. So I just feel privileged. Thanks for having me.
Well, we want to get into the story. So Steve, probably give us a little bit of backdrop, but I do have kind of one interesting story you're going to be intrigued by. And I mentioned it to you guys. I'm fascinated by medical stuff, and I think it's because I'm just fascinated by the detail, and even maybe, Steve, you could probably clarify, you know what you're going to do, but there's on-the-spot strategy that has to unfold based on how patients are going to react. I love that dynamic. It reminds me of draft day. I know it's weird things to think about, but people can change and move, and situations can move, and so you're having to adjust based on that. I'm fascinated. So Steve got me into, I got to videotape and photograph 4 open heart surgeries, and I absolutely had a blast. And I'll never forget, Steve, you saying to me, "Hey, come look at this," and I'm like, "Shh, you work." I was so freaked out about. He's taking
this is Troy Murphy's recreation, is to watch open heart surgeries.
But just an appreciation, not only for how He's created us, but that God gifted you, Steve, to do something like this. So how did that get started? How did your dream or idea of becoming a doctor form? I know it's part of your story.
Yeah, I grew up around a surgeon because my father was a surgeon, and I think sharing the same kind of mindset and same kind of the intellectual characters that he had, I was very similar in the way I thought and the way I analyzed things. One of the things that I've realized I'm very gifted with is seeing a situation very quickly for what it is and solving a problem based on things that are in front of me in sort of a mechanical way. So that's a great trait for a surgeon, right? And I love working with my hands. I love taking things apart and ruining them until I learned how to fix them right, but not with humans. So we did some more training in that. But I think I have 5 siblings, and of the 6 of us, 5 of us are physicians. And we weren't pushed into it, but I think just because of our family culture and the ethic that my father demonstrated to us, it attracted us to that profession. So I never thought I was going to do anything else.
Yeah. It's so amazing. I think that's why Ryan, he and I are good friends, because we love strategy. So, and actually I think too, even though you're saying you don't like to necessarily blow up a human, literally, but I actually think you and I enjoy on some level to do that to people, with people that want to. Let's unpack you. Let's like tear open the chest, figuratively speaking, and let's do some heart surgery. And that's kind of how we met years ago, on a journey of really just both wanting heart work done in our own life. So I think unpack a little bit of your story, how it starts, because you obviously went to college and then you started to become a doctor. And I guess give us a little bit of maybe some highlights, Steve, where leadership lessons were learned along the way.
Yeah, I was raised on this ethic that you can do anything, you just have to do the work. You're in control of your destiny. You have total control. You just have to put in the work and accomplish, and you'll get what you seek. And that really worked for me very well all the way through college, into residency, into training, becoming a surgeon, even getting hired as a surgeon. And so I became married, started a family through that. Everything was falling into place, and I kind of thought I had it all figured out. But I realized as I look back at that time, when we talk about sort of leadership as a clinician, for me at that point, it was all about accomplishment and image management. What my leadership was directed towards was making sure that I liked what other people saw in me and what they thought of me and how I was evaluated. So my behavior was reflected in that. And I think that got me to where I was, but it was, as we all know, very hollow and superficial. And then my life kind of blew up. We had a major health problem in my family that involved my wife, and it was a point where wasn't sure if she was going to survive this problem. It changed our dynamic, our interpersonal dynamic, and it's kind of set us on our ear for a number of years.
Yeah.
And not having a really solid understanding of who I was internally and what I stood for, I made some really bad decisions that further complicated the mess, that we had. And that story in detail, but it disrupted my family, it threatened my marriage, and I had to come to terms with that. And because we didn't establish a network of people around us, I didn't look at leadership as something someone else was going to bring to me. I thought I had it all figured out. We were kind of in this dark place where we didn't have resources.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what brought us to the church.
Wow.
Was
Can we
that
just
brokenness.
stop with I'm so struck still by image management.
Image management. I've heard that from a lot of people.
Performance.
Yeah.
You and I don't struggle with that at all.
Oh, no human being does. Whatever. Yeah. No, we all do. And I love the fact that you basically led with the quote unquote American dream.
Yeah.
Which is
absolutely.
Work hard, do it, put in the work, and you get a result. The problem is part of that, it feels right? It feels a little partially true because you can accomplish a lot of things.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of stuff until you come to the end of yourself. And that's what landed you in Troy's church, is you came to the end of you, what you can do.
Right.
And you saw something larger. Walk me through that. What happened? This guy's pretty charismatic. What happened? Tell me what happened there.
I wasn't even attending here, by the way.
Oh, you weren't here?
No, I've known Joe because Pete, my brother-in-law, worked here.
Okay.
So this was his first youth ministry job. So
Okay.
I've known Community Church as long as Pete and Sherry were here, which was 25 years. So I want to say it was, what was that, Steve? Early 90s they were here. So I've been coming back and forth to Green Bay, ironically, as a vacation spot from California.
Okay.
How hilarious is that? We would come here to vacation. So that, and then I did a men's retreat. But go ahead, Steve. You answer that.
Yeah, so it was in the late 90s, and we, in the midst of our struggles, actually my wife, you know, a good woman always leads her husband to the right place, and that's exactly what she did. And I thought she was crazy. In fact, I eventually started coming to this church. There was a different pastor, Joe Urkovich, who is now a very dear friend of mine still. We've done a lot of leadership things together, but I came because I felt this duty to my family. Again, it was about performance and about how we looked, and I wanted us to look like we were a family, even though we were struggling. And my wife started coming here. I just called it the rock concert. It was very different from my Presbyterian formal upbringing. And I started coming out of duty. But for the first time, I heard this pastor who I didn't know talk about this relationship with Jesus that never clicked for me. I don't know why. I'm sure it was spoken in front of me many, many times, but I never got it. And the idea that there was this God that wanted a relationship with me and didn't care about my past. What he wanted was my future and my heart. And that captured me. And that's what started our journey. And it didn't, you know, obviously didn't change overnight, but at the time there was a lot of talk about masculinity, femininity, and what it meant to be a man and what it meant to be a man under God's plan. And I learned a lot from that experience. And that was the beginning of our journey. But probably the second most important thing that happened to me is there were other dudes just like me in the same place who I met at church who loved the things that I like to do, hunting, fishing, outdoor stuff, and admitted that they also didn't have it figured out. And they, for a while, thought their wife was crazy. Dan is one of those guys that we clicked. And I saw like peers, other men who could, like, they were as messed up as I was. And I didn't have to be alone. And I realized the importance of letting other people speak into your life and share with you in the things that you struggle with. And that just launched us in a whole different way. We started praying that I would have good men alongside me, and then people like Troy show up and become leaders to me. They become mentors to me. They become close friends who actually care about me. And that's what changed us. That's what saved us.
Awesome.
I think, too, it's interesting because, Steve, you're not, I think of the doctor complex and the God complex and all that. And there's definitely a little bit of that in Steve, but I think that God brought us together because I think I have it, too, at times. I mean, seriously. And so I think we're two so strong and tense that it was good to meet and cross paths because we were able to stay with each other. Like, it's not intimidating. Like, I think sometimes I know, and I'm sure you have, it's intimidating to people because you fill a room, you're big. And I know I'm the same way. Yeah, it was comforting to go, God, this guy's not running. This is great.
And I think part of that was what I've heard from you and Joe. I've always had this affinity to pastors. I don't know why, but I've always gotten into great relationship with them.
We need help.
But one of the things, maybe because of, you know, me being a heart surgeon, and that's viewed as something unique and special, even though I'm not, that I could be with you and I wasn't ever asking anything of you.
Right.
I wasn't looking at you as a pastor.
Yeah.
And I could be a safe place for you. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say intentional, but somehow it just naturally happened. And I think the other thing is that has been so cool about our relationship over the years is when I talk about, you know, image management, and you've preached a lot about how that has been part of your journey over the years, and we've grown and developed together. And we'd be apart for periods of time where we didn't communicate a lot because of life, and then we come together and we'd be like, yeah, I'm in the same place, always, over and over and over again, as we've aged. It's been really cool to observe that.
Steve's done something. So I got to do something special with him. Steve's probably the only, there's not very many people I could count on one hand who have actually met my father and experienced my dad. So
Wow.
I talk about my father, and
Wow.
Steve got a full dose of my dad, and I'll never forget him walking in like, wow, how did you, and let's just say he said a lot of the things like, how did you get out of there? And so it was, in some ways, he got to see a lot of my journey and what was going on there. And anyway, I'm just appreciative he stuck with me in it.
Yeah, for sure. For life.
What is it like? You know, you were talking about the quote unquote God complex that some doctors have. If you ever watched the movie Doctor Strange, you know, he's this very like large and in charge figurehead personality. I'm a big fan of Marvel movies, by the way, but he's this God, he's got this God complex, and he comes face to face with his mortality and obviously the limitation of his skill. Walk me through that in your job, because Troy and I deal with people in emotional trauma. You're right there on the precipice. What has that journey been for you, literally when life and death is right there at the power of your fingertips?
I thought you were going to ask me a slightly different question, but I'm just thinking, so I was on a different track mentally, but a big part of my journey, huge part of my journey as a surgeon and as a person, is, remember that ethic we talked about? If you work hard enough,
Yeah.
that everything will work out. If you're diligent enough, you'll get the outcome that you seek. But the human body is unpredictable, and I had to learn a very hard lesson that I was not in control of my patients. Because if I was, what it meant was that every time I did something, if I worked hard enough, it would be successful. And in heart surgery, you stop someone's heart, and then you rebuild it, and you start it again. It means that they go home and they're alive. But that doesn't always happen. And on occasion, even though our intentions are right and good, the patients don't survive. And sometimes it's immediately after surgery or on the table, which means it's black and white. It was a result of my hands in my thinking. And so if the outcome was poor and someone passes away, based on my ethos as I was younger, it meant that I didn't do enough.
Wow.
I failed.
Yeah.
I mean, can we just camp on that for a second? How did you get beyond that in here and in here?
And I'm not emotional because of how hard it was. I'm feeling emotional because of how beautiful it is to be able to overcome that.
Yeah.
And it was a lot about the people around me. But to be very specific, first of all, I had to come to terms with the idea that I was not in charge. I had to be okay with that. And I don't know for me any other way to have done that except known that I'm owned and designed by a creator to do what I do. And he put me in a place so that I can have the courage to try and help people. But at the end of the day, I am not in charge of that. He is. And so in my former thinking, when things went bad and I would have to go counsel families about them losing their loved ones, I realized that I spent a lot of time covering up my tracks and defending my guilt because I felt like I had failed. So I had to explain to them why I did what I did and why it happened, and just a lot of defense. And I started to I went home one day that, a lot of people have this moment with their creator. And for me, it was I looked at other surgeons and how they dealt with it. I didn't see any examples. No one ever talked to me about that issue. It's kind of a major issue.
It's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
No one talked about it. I saw really bad examples of how people cope with that, surgeons cope with that. And so I finally said, man, this is outside of, I don't know what to do with this. And I literally just one day kind of just asked. I was driving over the bridge on I-43, and I just said, if you are who you are, God, I can't carry this. I need you to take this from me. Wow. What do I do with this? And the message that I got was, I'm okay with you. I'm okay with who you are. That's all you need to know.
Did that shred image management that day?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit?
Just a little bit.
Wow. That's so good.
Yeah, I think.
And so here's the switch. The flip side of that is I was hurting families because I couldn't grieve with them and I couldn't help. I couldn't appreciate the pain of their loss. I was too busy with my own pain of my failure. And when I started to realize, first of all, when I meet with families beforehand, I'm just incredibly honest with them. I have to believe in what I'm doing because it's helping them, not because I want to do another surgery, because I'm a great surgeon, because if I do 10 more, it's going to be great for my reputation. It's because I'm trying to help them. And I have the courage to do that, but I have to have integrity in that interaction. And then if things don't turn out, I still feel bad. There's still an element that, shoot, what can I learn from this? What did I do wrong? Where were my decisions not right? But I can be with them and help them in their pain and suffering instead of worrying about myself. And since then I've had family members come and hug me while I'm telling them their loved one was lost because they know I'm with them.
So you had heart work done on you through the fails of doing heart work.
Yeah, and I never could have done that without these men around me helping to maintain my identity for them. They were carrying who I was and helping me understand who I was, so I didn't have to prove it.
Yeah. You know, I just an application to this, what I think we're hitting on so many great points. But the idea for any leader in any business, nonprofit, wherever you're doing, to let go, you can't control people. And so I know it's such a great example you gave, how often I feel like I have to defend decisions made here at this church.
Guilty.
And like,
Understood.
because I did it right and I did these things. And you've missed the opportunity to actually be with someone in their grief. But I think that's a great lesson for any leader. I mean, we get so much from our culture about leadership books that say, perform and manage the image, right? And here's some tactics that you could use. And it's so much more than that. There's a human element to leadership that's messy. I like what you said, unpredictable. Sure, the physiology of our bodies is unpredictable, but the emotional, the relational aspect of people is unpredictable too. And so you could be leading a lot of people. It feels like everything's right. But you have all these moving parts called people and humans. And at any one point, someone has what I'd call a cultural heart attack. And it may go wrong. It may go really wrong.
And it's certainly not licensed to completely separate yourself from that. And we have a saying in heart surgery, one of my great mentors gifted me with, and that is, it's not the mistake, it's the response to the mistake that defines you.
Yeah, that's good.
And so
good.
It's not that we shouldn't learn, we shouldn't second guess what happened. We always have to go back and in retrospect and analyze what we've been through, because
what did you learn?
We won't grow. Exactly. But we have to celebrate the fact that we're willing to do that and willing to say, well, what I was thinking might not have been quite on track. It might have been off. I learned something from this. And I know now as a surgeon, I get to see that, because even though my vision's not as crisp as it was when I was 30, some of my dexterity is diminishing. I still know I'm by far doing the best work I've ever done, because the wisdom that I've been able to put on top of that far exceeds any physical disability that I've acquired, and I have plenty of them. But I am the best version of myself as a surgeon now because of my willingness to do that.
You have from what I'm hearing you right, you feel like you have a more well-rounded game. So in some cases, let's go back to Dr. Strange, the God complex. He's large and in charge and getting it done, but he's missing an element of the game. What I'm hearing you say is you've stepped into compassion and your real care for the people, and making it about them, not about you, your image management, or your ego. That has actually made you a better doctor. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, for sure. Embrace the uncertainty.
Yeah, and your weakness.
Celebrate your weakness. Celebrate your inadequacy. But someone has to do it. I operated on one of my best friends years ago.
Wow.
Because, and there's this thing about you don't operate on family and friends. It's not ethical. And if there's 8 different providers who do that around in the area, that I think that's a good way to go. But in this case, it was kind of a unique need for heart surgery, and both of us believed that I was the best person to do it for him because I knew him, because of the way I cared about him, but also because of what my skill level was. And so we made the decision that it was the right thing to do. And he made it clear to me that no matter the outcome, he was grateful that I had the courage to try. That's all he was asking.
Wow. That takes guts.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, that's great. Now I'm just thinking about so many different dimensions to this conversation. That's why I was so excited to have Steve here just to talk, because it's so relatable. Yeah, we're talking about physical heart surgery, but we're just talking about leadership, and he's already intersected faith into that and how important that is for him.
And I've learned how doctors think, and I mean, ones that are truly compassionate. I know that there's some that are. I would guess, doctor, I'm going to call you doctor, sorry, just for this one. But you have doctor friends who maybe have not learned that lesson, and part of your influence, if you will, is to more so caught than taught. They're going to ask you questions, and the way you carry yourself, the way you talk through that with them probably is going to impact the culture of your hospital environment simply by the way you carry yourself, not preachy, but just here's what I learned, and they're looking at you going, wow. That's not image management, that's called leadership.
It's becoming my passion, that exactly what you just described, to share with my colleagues. And because you said elephant in the room, there are so many things about medicine that we just don't ever talk about. And one of the big areas is, how do you deal with a disappointment?
Yeah.
Correct.
I don't care if you're a family practice doctor and someone died because they got too much of a certain medicine and it may not be directly connected to you. Everybody, or you just missed that they had heart disease and you didn't know it, and they suddenly go down, and everyone feels that. It weighs on them, but none of us help each other through that. We don't grab arms when it comes to dealing with disappointment.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
Because we are our own best resource, because we're the only ones who really, really understand.
My youngest daughter, and Steve knows my family, but she's working at Children's Hospital, and her first kind of entrance into that reality was a young child bleeding out, bursting stitches while under anesthesia, and her slipping on the blood and trying to go get blood, just the trauma. It was interesting. Her description was, she actually said emotionally in that moment she was fine. It was the next day when they called the meeting with the surgeon and all the nurses, and the surgeon started to weep. And it was like she got permission to actually be human and feel for it. And it was so good to hear that, because I've been hearing that from Steve. And Steve, it feels like, well, not even feels like, what's gone on is you started out as a warrior. There's archetypes they talk about. You've made that transition. You were the warrior getting it done. You moved into a king stage where you've kind of owned the land. But I sense you're moving into that sage part of your life. And that has left, at least in our conversations, you with some different goals. And I want to give you the chance to talk about your influence isn't just operating on patients anymore. It's to create culture. Tell us a little bit about how you're doing. I know you're excited about that. So tell us about Civilitas.
Yeah, well, so I have a platform. I've been appointed president of our medical staff, which means I have oversight over the entirety of Bellin Health System, which has close to 1,000 providers, overseeing the medical affairs, the clinical activities of our organization. And as a result of that, I have this role, and the role is not defined in our system, and it's evolved. But we've evolved to a point where now we have a dyad model where physicians are paired with an administrative lead to lead the organization, but it's in its early stages. We came out of this thing where we had hospital administration and physicians were in independent practice and we're customers, to a very different dynamic where now we're all in a partnership.
Interesting.
And so we've been through this phase where our culture was such that we couldn't have difficult conversations amongst ourselves about bad outcomes. Everyone was defensive. They felt threatened, and it was non-productive. And I set out to change that. I saw it as a huge pathology in our organization, and not that we're a bad organization, because we're not. We're a great culture, but I think we have opportunity to improve.
Yeah, we all do.
And the other part of it is we're a relatively small entity among giants. We don't have a lot of financial resources. The workforce is very, there are limitations. There's a strong need. We're constantly filling gaps of employees. And so I realized that the only way we could solve that was to be the best place to work. We had to have a place where people love to come, and that would overcome inadequate or differentials in pay and vacation and all the other stuff. And so durability of employment, lack of turnover we had to be a great place to work. And in order to do that, as physicians, we no longer could be this fist-pounding, demanding, dictatorial kind of culture. We had to change to something different. And so that's what I decided was going to be my legacy as president. And one of the things that influenced me heavily, I told you what I came from. When I did my heart surgery, I operate with like 19, 23-year-old surgical techs who are assisting me with heart surgery. And when I was younger, my expectation of them was, you need to hold this situation with this heart surgery that we're doing in this patient's life. You need to understand the gravity of this in the same way that I do. So, and that's unfair, entirely impossible for them at their age and the maturity of their brain, even physically.
Right.
And it just was wrong. And so if things were not going in the order and they weren't behaving in a way that exhibited my stress about this situation, I would lash out. I would make them, fall in line. And that was how I led. I was at a global leadership summit here at this building, and I heard Horst Schulze talk. He's he was at one point the president or CEO or something of Ritz-Carlton Enterprises and a guru in the hospitality industry. But one of the things that he said that stuck with me was one of our principles of how we are successful is that we believe in valuing our people at least as much as our product. Their product is hospitality. My product is healthcare, taking care of patients. And I thought, what does that look like? I walked into the hospital lobby the next day, and there were these people who greet patients in the lobby, and I looked at them. I saw them for the first time. I've walked by that desk every day for the last 10 years. I wouldn't have even recognized them on the street. And I went up with my staff, and I started to see the people who were helping me and realizing that those 19 and 23-year-old people were there because they wanted to do good. They wanted to help. They wanted to make my life better. And I was oppressing their ability to be free because they were afraid of me.
So this is in my world, I preach this, and Joe Ellen knows this too, but like it's my mantra, relational equity. What you were going after was, I'm not using people to become what I need them to be for me. It is, I'm here to serve not just the patient. I'm actually here to serve the 23-year-old intern or whoever it is. I'm seeing them with that same. Well, that sounds almost like Jesus. Actually, it does. That's awesome.
Well, we all learn and grow eventually. I did it a lot the hard way. I did all the wrong things first. I paid the price for it, but fortunately, I think I learned something from it.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
But you see them. What I think I'm hearing you say, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You saw it equal. I'm not just a cardiologist or a heart doctor. I am on mission to build big people while we build back hearts.
Well, here's what happened. We had a ton of turnover. We had a horrible culture. We had a toxic culture in our operating room. People would come and go, and people were not happy. They didn't socialize. They didn't take care of each other. When we changed the philosophy of how we realized that we were heavy influencers, obviously as physicians in the environment. When I made that mental flip overnight, what I saw start to happen was I was spending some time with them outside of the OR and getting to know them as people and helping them understand why I did the things that I did, why I took some things so importantly and other things not, and just help them to know my heart as a surgeon as their leader more and began to appreciate them and encourage them. Within a year, the year before that, we returned to the operating room 16 patients for bleeding from heart surgery. That's one of the things that can happen because we thin the blood. The next year, 1. How did that happen? Honestly, I have no idea because we didn't change our strategy. But what I do know is because I began to trust the people who are around me and stop trying to do their job as well as mine, it allowed me to focus on what I was supposed to be doing. And our technical results got better. So here's what I learned from that. I believe that if we help all the people around us be free to express themselves, this concept of psychological safety.
Exactly.
If they can be truly who they are and say these wild ideas without being embarrassed or humiliated, they're going to contribute in ways that they never would have otherwise contributed.
So true.
And it will multiply. So we will see performance and execution that is beyond our wildest dreams. People will do things they never thought they were capable of because we're unleashing their true potential. And what I've called this is civilitas, based on the word civility, which means I'm going to treat you the way I want you to treat me. I'm going to recognize you as a human being first.
So good.
Yes, we still have hierarchy. Yes, someone has to be in charge in certain circumstances, but we're going to value each other and our interaction and make that as important as what we're trying to accomplish. And that, in a nutshell, is what this cultural movement that we've begun investing in our organization. It's now part of our one-year strategic plan of the organization as a whole, which I'm so excited about that our CEO said, yes, we want this. This is right and good. It says a lot about Bellin. Not that I'm advertising, but it does. And it's just beautiful. So that is what this heart surgeon is doing now in my organization.
Wow.
And I'm having a blast, both operating, doing all that stuff, but also getting in these conversations with people who they never would have otherwise been comfortable, even addressing.
Yeah, that's called, in our words, leading up. And you are building ecosystems and greenhouses of thought that are affecting the culture of an entire hospital.
There's so many leadership points.
Oh man.
On this that are so transferable, but I'm always just amazed that, it's amazing to work on a heart, and I've gotten to watch you do that 4 times, which is like just amazing, cool, unbelievable, such an honor. But actually I laugh because you're actually now doing deeper heart work with leaders, with people, with a culture. And as much as we want books and strategies and vision statements and values, culture changes everything. Culture trumps pretty much all those things. It's the predominant shifter of a space, and a work culture is culture itself. And wow, civilitas. So is there a book coming or anything on civilitas eventually?
No, it's taken on a life of its own. So I think I'm hoping what will happen is I was very afraid once I got it sort of approved by the leadership to be acknowledged as something important and put into our strategic plan that we wouldn't have anything really, because we're all about measuring data and how do you measure cultural change? It's very difficult. If I'm saying cultural change is going to lead to less bleeding, how do we connect those dots? So I really was, after I stepped out there, I felt kind of naked, like, uh-oh, now I got to answer. But what happened was I built a team of people around me who are incredibly creative and gifted and just took off with it. Our chaplaincy is involved.
That's great. And
I have a team of people who are in communications and marketing who really believe in this. We've used a lot of Amy Edmondson's work. She worked with Google and wrote this book on psychological, I forget, safe work. I can't remember the name of her book, but great book. And she's one of the speakers at GLS as well, which is where I kind of got connected to that. But we are now, there's the Institute for Healthcare Improvement is something we've been very much involved with for decades, and it's kind of at the forefront of medicine. They talked about the 100,000 Lives campaigns, about hospital errors and people dying unnecessarily years ago as one of their claims to fame. But they have the potential to present things at a national level. And so I'm hoping within a year when we're taking a psychological safety survey that actually comes from Amy's work and using it before we start a program. We have teams throughout the organization, something close to 60 teams now, who are taking our curriculum monthly and having conversations.
Wow.
Based on civilitas. Now civilitas has become an adjective. I needed to have a civilitas conversation with my, so-and-so this week.
That's culture.
Which their meaning is a difficult conversation.
Right. Crucial
conversation. And so we have somewhere around 60 different teams who are taking this on now in small group settings. And when we have the outcomes, I hope that we'll be able to then describe it at a national level. But this idea is cropping up all over the country in industry of any varieties. Everyone's realizing, I don't know if it's the generational shift, but that we have got to harness this idea of mutual respect in the old hierarchical ways of interacting in business and in the world just are not effective anymore.
So I have a question. You talked about psychological safety, you're talking about culture, and we're talking about elephants in the room. I'm going to hit you with this one. So walk me through March of 2020. This little virus hits America.
Oh,
you've got civilitas, crucial conversations. This isn't top-down management. It is and guess what, doctor? There's a lot of opinions flying in March of 2020. Walk me through what it was like to be you and that team at that time.
Well, civilitas came weeks before that. It was like someone had actually made that plan.
Wow.
Ironically. And here's the cool thing. Everything shifted to web conversations. All our meetings were virtual. How do you take 64 opinionated clinicians on a call and have any sort of order and effectiveness and, get through a conversation? The level of respect that was demonstrated in our initial conversations blew me away.
That's so good.
It was friendly, it was cordial, it was mutually supportive. The other thing that it did was I talked to you about this dyad relationship. Well, the physicians had not evolved to understand what their authority was, what their position was in that dyad, what were they supposed to be doing? What did that look like? Obviously, no one, including the federal government, was willing to make a decision about any of the ways that we handle this infection, this pandemic, without the advice of medical, to our detriment, without the advice of doctors. And I think it led us to make some bad decisions, actually, because doctors' duty is to prevent healthcare issues, not address economic concerns, not address social concerns, not to address family, strife.
Right.
We're just supposed to prevent people from getting sick. So that's what we're going to do. That's what you asked for. That's what we're going to do. That's a whole editorial side note. But the doctors became so engaged. First of all, we stopped doing anything, so we had nothing to do. We met an hour every day, 6 days a week as a panel. I was part of that leadership committee, our incident command, which we had built a structure for just weeks before the pandemic also.
Wow.
Just happened to feel like it was time to make it, part of our system. And it was an incredibly good experience. And we got, as an organization, we got some national kind of publicity about how we had handled things, because we were one of the first organizations to start doing elective surgeries again, to do it, how to figure out how to do it safely. We had a cabinet member, the Secretary of Health, came and interviewed our organization on campus.
Wow.
Because of what they were hearing. Our CEO was giving these nightly talks, which we called Connect with Chris, and they were listening in apparently because they were starting to hear how we were making decisions. And so it was amazingly beautiful to see how we responded, and our group of docs with their administrators did a tremendous job. So it wasn't, as you might expect, it might be difficult, but it was really handled very, very well.
Wow.
There wasn't a lot of fighting. There was a lot of fear that we had to overcome, There was a lot of disagreeing, but we went to the evidence and we made decisions based on evidence.
Yeah. It's almost like there was a gift to you and the organization in COVID in that, and it's hard for people to probably hear that, but anytime a culture has a common enemy, a common crisis to face, it's interesting how we band together. And so in some ways, it could have been the gift to civilitas to go, there's no other, we have an enemy and it's not each other.
I have no doubt that none of this would have launched nearly in the way that it has without that influence. There is no question.
Yeah.
It transformed our organization in a great way. We benefited from it. The pandemic has been horrible for all of us.
Yeah.
But there has been some positives that have come out of it, and it's been a huge influencer. It accelerated our growth and maturity as to how we now lead ourselves in a big way.
It's almost like organizations have to think through that, like any problem, adversity, pandemics, epidemics, anything that you go through, there is gold in it. You got to find it. And
I think we're learning that through what we went through. Troy, we've had talks on racial reconstruction. What I'm learning that as I connect the dots back to that, including in my own personal life, we use the scripture sometimes, quick to listen, slow to speak, quick to listen, slow to speak. I'm noticing that leaders across the board are quicker to listen, slower to speak, and bringing conversations to the forefront where it's not top down anymore. It's really us, we, and our versus me, serve me, some me. I'm hearing that. I think the pandemic for our country, there's divides. There clearly is. But if we could start adopting an us, we, our mentality versus a do what I say mentality, we might get more problems solved faster.
I agree.
Steve, wow.
That was a great insight.
Oh gosh, thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing with us. And man, we could probably have him in another hour of just talking more stuff. Maybe there's a part 2 to Steve, right? But thank you so much. Thanks for coming in.
Of course. Yeah, it's been an honor. Obviously, I love this. And just to be able to share that and express that is really a privilege, and to be around men like the two of you. So thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, that closes another episode of Lead Wisco. Gosh, hang on for some of the info to get connected to us. God bless. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Hey everyone. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode with Dr. Steve Gerndt and learned from his lessons on doing the heart work. Is there a way that you can implement civilitas in your leadership or at your organization? And that's a wrap on Season 1. Be sure to check out all 13 episodes this season. Do you have a favorite episode that you could share with a friend? Or is there a specific leadership topic or guest that you think we should talk with? Let us know by emailing us at leadwisco@gbcc.me. We're gearing up for Season 2 to launch later this fall. Until then, check us out on social media for more leadership content. As always, thanks for listening.